Hey, and welcome to Her Sex. I'm Dr. Leslie Wakefield. I'm a pelvic health physical therapist, and here we're going to dive into real stories from women about their personal journeys, as well as insights from experts on female sexuality. This podcast aims to go beyond the usual stereotypes, to unveil taboos, and to celebrate the diverse ways that women experience sexuality. Grab a seat, let's take a peek behind the velvet curtain. Hey, and here we are. So today I'm with CJ, who is CJ from No Shame with CJ. And CJ is a self-proclaimed, self-described, late-blooming, queer, kinky woman. And if that's not description enough, there is more. She's a coach. She works with clients. But she came into this work through very personal experience. And I think it's a niche that we really haven't spoken to on the podcast yet. So I'm excited to have you on. Will you tell us about yourself and your story? And then, of course, how that leads to helping other women.
Hi, Leslie. Thank you. Yes, I am calling myself an alternative pleasure coach and mentor. And you hinted around that. Yes, I consider myself to be a late blooming, kinky queer person who my queerness extends to my sexuality and also my relationship style. I am in an open marriage. I've been married for almost 2 years, but been in this relationship for 8. And it all started when I separated from my first husband. And that was about 14 years ago. And I was in my mid-40s. And that's when I embarked on a journey that has taken me to places I did not expect and I wasn't even aware of, right? But I'll tell you what was going on in that marriage that still applies today, that was key for me feeling like this is not where I need to stay. This is not where I feel like I am being seen in a way that feels good to me. And I knew that there was more that I wanted to experience. And it wasn't even about monogamy. It was about the lack of intimacy in my first marriage. And there's a whole lot of story there, but the important thing is that I had a very strong sense of my own deserving of pleasure, that I was not willing to sacrifice in order to keep my family together and to stay in a mediocre marriage.
When you say
What?
pleasure, you mean physical pleasure? You mentioned intimacy, physical pleasure, emotional pleasure.
Yes, all of the things, the emotional connection, the physical connection, that intimacy had deteriorated after having small kids. And for a variety of reasons, I'm not blaming anybody. It just, I wanted it. He did not. He had some emotional barriers to it. And I felt like in order to get over them, intimacy, physical intimacy had to be part of it. And we couldn't meet on that. And the bottom line is that he had harbored a lot of resentment. And my sense was that it's just a bridge too far at that stage, right? Once you have been holding on to resentment for a while, it's kind of a no turning back thing, unless it's going to take significant work. And we did some of the work, but it just wasn't enough to save our marriage. There wasn't enough effort there. And for me, it was like, well, it wasn't only my choice to separate, but it's like, do I even want my kids seeing this like less than healthy relationship?
Uh-huh.
Every relationship has struggles, challenges, that's normal, but I really felt like we were leading two separate lives. It didn't feel like a connected family to me. So we did separate and divorce. And then I embarked on the wonderful world of dating in my 40s. And for someone my age, I didn't ever have to really date when I was younger. I was a serial monogamist. I went from relationship to relationship that were typically around 4 years. That seemed to be like an average for me was about 4 years. And so it wasn't like I had a ton, but I had had several before I got married in my early 30s. And it was always someone was just sort of like floated into my life, and I didn't really have to like seek people out. But that also, like, I would have a great time with people, like, had a lot of wonderful relationships. And then at some point, it was like, this isn't exactly for me, or, oh, I've grown, they haven't, or I want to move and they don't, or whatever the thing. It was just sort of like they came to sort of a natural ending. Sometimes it didn't feel natural to them or to me, it just things happen. But monogamy was just my relationship style, right? It's what I saw around me. Um, and I don't really feel like there was a lot of pressure from my family or something to get married. It was kind of like, oh, she's doing whatever she does. But I really did stick to the monogamy model and was very much like a faithful person. So I think when I was like, oh, I'm actually attracted to this other person, or like, oh, I want to like, this is like kind of not so great anymore. Like, what else is out there? Then I would move on, right? That was part of my story. So there was never a contemplation of like, what other options are there? So since my divorce in my 40s, it's been like, oh, a discovery of what the options are.
How,
And
I mean, how do you go about discovering those options? Why wouldn't you just follow the same pattern?
um, yeah, I think a lot of it had to do with my age. And I was actually looking for my next partner initially. I did feel like, okay, like I know I can do better. Like let's get get my mojo back. And like I wasn't looking for that right away. The first thing was to like try out the mom bod to see if it still operates.
Right, test drive.
Right? Like I got to take this mom bod for a ride. And which was hard to do. Like it's really challenging when your body is just completely different than it used to be. And I was a lot heavier. I live in an area that has lots of beautiful people. And at that time, the sort of style was like the teenage boy, like hip size for women, like really just uber thin and fit and boyish looking. And I was definitely not that. So I felt like I had all these feelings of not being like pretty enough or, you know, attractive enough. And then my age on top of it. So at first it was just like, okay, let's just have sex. Let's rip the Band-Aid off. And happy to say, like, I did that relatively quickly and discovered, yay, it still works. And yes, like, and it really, like, there was something in my mind that was like, look, it's different. I don't feel as confident yet in my body. Because of the way that it looks. And yet it can still bring pleasure. And that's what I really want people to hold on to. Like, if your body can bring you pleasure, and I know for some people there is a hurdle there, but where can it feel pleasure? The pleasure might be different, right? But can we focus in on the function and the experience of pleasure rather than the aesthetic, right? And if your body doesn't actually bring you pleasure, what's getting in the way of that? How can we prioritize that and get curious about it? Because pleasure is really a beautiful thing that we are all deserving of experiencing, right? So for me, there was like a little bit of a mind shift there. And then I was just sort of like sleeping around and dating and doing all the things, and also getting frustrated because it felt like a lot of the men my age were not available to me or to other women of their age. So I had a lot of stories that I was telling myself about that. But I just kept going on. And I did get into another relationship. And I feel like in some ways that started my curiosity around other things. And it all happened when he shared something with me that was very private and embarrassing to him, but it was a core part of his erotic self. And instead of being judgmental and sort of going, oh, I kind of leaned in and said,
Oh,
tell me a little more. So um, it kind of just like opened up from there. I do want to go back to before I ended up in a relationship with this person, though. I had my first same gender experience where I had always had an occasional attraction to other women. An appreciation, I think, like because I used to say, oh, it's because, I've done life drawing classes and I can appreciate the form in so many ways. But also there were some women that I was like, yeah, like, no, that's an attraction right there. But I was very curious about it because I had never actually been physically intimate with a woman. And I kind of went on a mission to make and
tell me about the mission. How does one go on a mission? A divorcee in middle age has decided to go on a mission and have a same experience.
uh, well, for me, it just so happened that I was like, wait a second, I am going to the city where I used to live. And there was someone who had told me that they were very attracted to me that I used to work with. And I was in a relationship at that time, and I didn't even like entertain the idea that I could do that. So I was like, wait a second, I'm going there. Like, I wonder if she would be interested because we were still friendly and I would consider us to be friends still. And I said, okay, now that I'm single, like I'd be curious if you'd still be down. And she was like, hell yes. And I said, but wait a second. Like, I was so weird about it. I was like, I don't know if I can actually do it. I'm nervous. I'm scared. What if I have to like stop in the middle of it? Are you going to be okay? Blah, blah, blah. What a joke, because that is just so not me. Like, really, I realize now, like, I am not the person, unless I'm really uncomfortable, not happy. I am a sensory slut. Like, I just love the experience of like of our senses of sensuality, of sex. And in the middle of it, I remember just thinking like, why would I even think that I wouldn't enjoy this? It's very different than being with a man. And it's amazing. It's like she was very soft and just, it's very different and just felt so wonderful.
From a sensory perspective, because I think there's a lot of people are like, yeah, I know what you mean. I like sensory, I like touch, I like sensuality, which is something different than sexuality. They can go together, but they're two different things. So from a sensory perspective, when you say it was such a different experience for you, you're a connoisseur of a sensory experience at this point. What were the sensory tactile cues that were so noticeably different for you?
honestly, it was the tactile sense of her skin was just so completely different than that of any man I had been with. And the shape of her body and the softness and the fullness of that was like, wow, there is something just really beautiful about getting to experience something completely different. Yet it's similar to yourself in many ways. It wouldn't necessarily always be, but in that case it was. So there was something really interesting about that. And just the way that, I mean, everyone smells different, right? But scent is super important to me. Like I really connect with people um, and their pheromones. And it's just really pleasurable and enjoyable and something different when you know, you're broadening your experience, right? So I had that experience. I didn't have any other same gender experiences before I met this person that I got into the relationship with. And so then we started playing. And I sort of approached things like, oh, well, he's got this thing. And what does that look like for him? Like, so I got really curious. What does it look like? Where do you go? Who are you attracted to? What kind of porn do you like to watch? Show me. And then I would look and I would say, well, I like this too. And like, it just sort of was like, yeah, I can see why that's hot for you. And we juiced us up, like in terms of our connection and our sexuality together. We started doing role play and things like that. And then I had an experience with one of the first people I slept with after my marriage where I got a hint of dominance from that person that I was like, what is, what was that about? And it was just a question mark, like, I like a little bit of force. And I mentioned that to this partner and I was like, okay, like I want to deep dive on this. So we started going down that path. At the same time, I started listening to some podcasts and people were talking about BDSM and dominance and submission, which is a part of BDSM, and DS relationships, Dom sub relationships. And I was like, oh my God, people actually have this as like a relationship style. What is this? Like, this is okay. What is this? This is fucking cool. So I was listening to that. And then a lot of times, what was part of it was being non monogamous. And then it was like, oh, right. There's that thing. Like I had known previously about polyamory. And I always felt like just a deep sort of like acceptance of, I could probably do that. Like I get that. Like no like knee jerk negative reaction. I was definitely like, I understand that. So then it was sort of like, hmm, you know,
One door opens the next door, and then you're all
yeah,
the way in that
exactly.
rabbit hole.
Yeah. Like you end up in a room and you're like, oh, this is kind of fun. And then it's like, oh my God, there's another door. Like, what is that? So you go open that and you're like, whoa, like there is a whole party happening in here that I didn't even know about. Like, why didn't you guys invite me?
Going on this whole time?
Yeah, that's literally how I was like, what? There are sex parties? There are people doing like open relationships and telling each other, and like people are doing kinky things and people like to get spanked. And like, what is this? And just sort of like the whole world of all of these things was opening up to me. And I was exploring it primarily in the context of this relationship, but I also was a little unsettled in like really thinking like long term with this person was probably not going to be the thing. But it was like, okay, well, we're having a lot of fun. And then I discovered, like, we were talking about non-monogamy and DS and stuff like that. And then I discovered that he had actually started, because we started talking about it, exploring on his own and not telling me. And that was just sort of like, okay, this is not what the whole idea was. Like, this was something that the opportunity was there to say, I don't want to be nailed down in a monogamous relationship. And he wasn't grown up enough to have that conversation, or he had his own reasons for not doing that. So we broke it off. And I found myself in community that I at times felt pretty connected to and other times didn't, but it was a sex positive community where I was like, okay, amongst people who were speaking the language that I was starting to learn.
This is a community that you had sort of started to engage with and learn about during your explorations with this previous partner.
Correct.
And so you stayed in touch with that community and continued on your own.
I did.
Got it.
I did. And there were lots of workshops on different aspects of sexuality, from safer sex conversations to cuddles to massage parties to, sorry?
What's a cuddle?
Cuddles are amazing. Let's just start there. I learned so much from engaging in group platonic cuddles. And I actually trained to become a cuddle facilitator and a professional cuddler because I got so much out of it.
And this that makes sense.
Yeah, it informs a lot of my coaching as well, because it's a practice is how I look at it. And it's you need to be able to practice. It's a way to find your voice. It's a way to discover what you want and don't want, and a way of like stating that and holding your boundaries and holding others' boundaries as well, accepting others' boundaries. So basically, a group of people come together, and in my case, my wonderful teacher, facilitator held a very tight container where we would go through a series of practices that would lead us up to a free time cuddle where we would negotiate with other people in the room for touch, platonic touch, nothing sexual. And it was also optional. You did not have to touch. You could sit and be in the room and just like try to feel comfortable, or to watch other people so that you could build up for touch. As a single person, I realized, because I was doing this in between having partners, it was so important. And it had a light bulb moment where I was like, oh my God, I love sex so much because I love touch, and I am touch starved. And I think it's a great safe way generally. I mean, not all things are equal, but find a safe cuddle space if you're a person who is touch starved, or you are like caregiving depleted. Like, it's a beautiful thing for people who are in marriages where one person doesn't want touch and the other person does, or one person is sick, or if you're single. There's so many reasons why this type of service is so helpful and beautiful. And it can be like a self-care practice, like a massage.
And it's amazing. I mean, I think so many
really
people
amazing.
are touch starved. I think so much of our work and even our communities these days are online. which is amazing because it opens the world,
That,
but it keeps actually people physically very separated. And hearing you talk, I wonder how many people do engage in very sexual activity as a route to actually fill their need for touch that might have been otherwise filled just by touch.
yeah,
But
that
for
was
your
me.
family member, or if you don't have access to those things, a
Yep.
group like this,
Yeah.
the oxytocin release, like the hormone release in your body, like it's so good. It's so healthy for us to receive hug, to receive touch. And I think there are probably many people who
Yeah.
don't realize they are touch starved.
It's also something you can practice for yourself. And there are online resources or people that you can follow where they would go through that sort of thing. I would say, for purposes of your listeners, as women, we are so about giving to others and worrying about what someone else needs more than ourselves that often we end up in a situation like I did, where I mean, I knew I wanted sex because that was still part of it, right? But I didn't necessarily know how to ask for what I wanted. I didn't feel that I had a voice, and I needed to practice that and to exercise those muscles and develop them. And this is a great way to do that. And it's a great way of discovering more about yourself. Because, like I said, we often are just so focused on others that if someone says, well, what do you want? We don't even know how to answer that, right? Or this idea of like, I realized that I shape shifted a lot in relationships based on what someone else would want and be like, oh, I can do that. I still have this tendency because I'm a pleaser, but I also have a stronger sense of like, I'm willing to give, but I want back too. Like it's more of a give and a take. Like I'll try something and I want you to try something for me. There has to be more give and take. Whereas previously, like in dating, I think this is very common. We don't go necessarily into dating with like, this is who I am, this is what I want. And if the other person matches me, great. Often, or I found myself doing this, was like, what is going to make me attractive to them? Like, instead of leaning back a little and being like, are they attractive to me? I was more like, how can I make myself attractive to them in terms of looks, in terms of behavior, in terms of interests, in terms of relationship style, what I wanted to do? All of those things, I was matching myself to them and shape shifting instead of being who I am and being authentic. Now, I was on a discovery journey, right? And now I can look back and be like, why did I do that? And I know why. Like, I was trying to figure out even where I was going to land because I still wasn't totally sure, right? But I think that that's really important for us. Like, people don't even want us to do that, right? Because they don't even know who's going to show up. And you're trying to mind read somebody else, and you're probably wrong. Like, it's just, don't even try to like be a giver and try to give someone something because you need to ask, like, what is it that you want or what are your expectations? And then we can figure out where we meet or not. And we often have this like people pleasing attitude that doesn't even like feel good to the other person because we didn't ask if it was actually what they wanted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I
Yeah.
think I see some pieces of that because there's a lot of pieces of that, but I even just in girlfriends and ourselves sometimes, we catch ourselves if we have just a little bit of space enough to catch ourselves doing this. I think in some respects it's a little bit expected socially
Yeah.
for women in general. Nobody loves generalities, but let's just say in general to be the person that makes the other person comfortable, to be the person that fills the gap, that picks up the slack, that is all of the things, the maiden,
Amenable.
goddess, the mother, like fill
Yes.
all roles and just pick which one you're going to be today with this person. And you might have to switch tomorrow. I see sometimes, especially women with children or who are entering middle age or past the prime that they feel like they used to be in. And so they say to themselves, what's the man that I want to get? What's the partner I want to get? Well, how do I change myself to be attracted to that person and draw them to me? And it's hard to watch when you're watching someone do that. But the truth is, we probably all have done that at some point in some regard. Most of us don't have that very intrinsic, like, sense of backbone that I wish that we did.
Yeah.
So, yeah, tell me more, because I think that probably resonates with a lot of people.
Yeah. We're rewarded for being amenable and moldable and for the different roles that we play. We are, one thing in going through my divorce, I realized was that things just changed in ways I didn't expect. People move in and out of your life in different ways. Once you go from a couple to being a single, it's like there's a lot of social changes that can occur in that. That can be quite painful. And it's really interesting. I didn't realize until it happened. It's like, oh, there is a real expectation after a certain age that you are coupled up. And what does it say about you when you're not? Is that can be very wounding and very isolating at times. Um, so I want to say for anybody, that's bullshit. And you are a whole person no matter what. And there's so much out in the world that, like, don't wait for the partner. I have a partner now. I'm married and again, but I was single for a long time. And I wish that I hadn't spent so much of that time trying to couple back up. I did a lot of exploring and I learned a lot along the way, but it's also like a mindset of just being like, I don't have to answer to anybody. Like, what fun is that? I definitely had some of that early on when I separated from my first husband. I was just like, I am out of this box. I can do whatever I want. And I'm a very like expressive person in terms of aesthetics around me. So I painted my house in outrageous colors. I tore up the lawn because I didn't want a lawn anymore. I started doing the landscaping the way I wanted to do it. That's how I started expressing it that way. And this feeling of like, I don't have to go through anyone else and negotiate about this. So I wish I had carried that through a little bit longer in terms of like, what can I do? And like, what does this mean for me? Or then I would hear like complaints from friends who are married about, and then I would have those moments of like, I'm so glad I don't have to deal with that. Right. So just enjoy it also. Like, and get your needs met where you can. Cuddles are a great way. So
Yeah, so
we are rewarded.
take me back to that cuddle, because I know I distracted you by getting so
Yeah.
interested in that. So you were exploring all these things, and one
Mm.
door opened to the next door, it opened to the next door, and you went down the rabbit hole of BDSM and queer and cuddle parties, polyamory, non-monogamy, however you would describe that. Keep going with your journey.
Yeah. So it's like you said, it's just all these different things. And a lot of time there's overlap in the communities. Like cuddles can be part of sex positive communities. They can be very separate. But there's kind of like a, a thread going through all of them. So King, because that's something that's become so important to me, I realized in that relationship that I was trying to experiment more with that, and he could only take it so far. So once we broke up, I was trying to explore on my own, and I would go to workshops. I went online, and I was desperate, honestly, for a moment. And I kind of signaled a little too hard that I was looking for this type of relationship, and immediately was like, oh my God, no, this is like scary. So I don't recommend like being like, I want to free, because, being and experiencing BDSM and the flavor that I wanted, which was submitting to a male dominant, female maybe, but I was really like focused in on men. It takes from someone like me and for most people a lot of trust. And there has to just be a real deep understanding of like this person is worthy of submitting to, because I'm not naturally submissive. I I am in the kinky world, I'm considered a switch. So I can dominate or I can submit, top or bottom. And but I was really desperate for that experience and for that type of relationship. But boy, I was looking for the right flavor, and I went through a lot of shitty flavors in the meantime, or just like really like not so great experiences where I just could sense like this person is shady, or I think that they're manipulative, or there's something there. Or you can go into like the kink community and go to dungeons, which can be safer depending on, because they have monitors there who are watching the.
What's a dungeon?
Oh, dungeon. A dungeon is a private space typically, but it's like for the public to join, usually as a membership, or they'll open it up for a course. And it's a place where there are kinky um, apparatuses to use, right? Like you will have, I guess, in 50 Shades of Grey, there was like the red room or whatever. Like it'll have the furniture that you might want to use to get people into positions that like a normal house wouldn't have. And it's where people gather to practice BDSM together in scenes. Like they'll do things like people will negotiate a scene that will take a certain period of time or go through a certain series of events. Typically, there is not sex occurring. There's no genital to genital sex, but there is the experience of maybe getting spanked or flogged or whipped or slapped or served, like just serving drinks to somebody or serving them whatever, doing those types of things within a space where other people can watch. You can exhibit yourself, and also where like a good dungeon will have monitors. So if there's an issue, you can like ask for help. I wasn't really good at like feeling part of that scene to where there was still a barrier for me, but I learned a lot in going and watching other people. And I learned what I didn't want by watching, like, oh, that looks hot. That's a no. Um, oh, I wonder if I could do that. Or like just in watching their interactions together, and also watching other people play. And like, particularly from the perspective of like, I could play with that person, I would not play with that person. So it gave me a little bit more knowledge in that space. Does that answer your question about what a dungeon is?
Yeah, it kind of popped into my mind. It's like a
Yeah.
sexy YMCA. Like you join the membership, there's safety crew, there's the exercise equipment, they do workshops.
Yeah, you
Watch
have your first
people.
aid class.
Yeah, I could
Totally. Yes, it's very similar. And that's the funny thing, like in this world, there are all these secret clubs that you don't know about. It's like the secret YMCA, right? And you'll have like um sex clubs or, play parties, things like tantra events, retreats, all these things, they're available, right? These things exist. Whatever flavor you want to try, it's available. Just
And
be
there's a
discerning.
lot of people that want to try it with you, apparently.
There's a lot of people that want to try it with you.
Yeah.
So, if I may, that makes me think of this. I had my own like sense of not being desirable or attractive to others when I first started my dating journey in my 40s. And I will tell, I if I could write a letter to myself now, just be like, this is all bullshit. Do not listen to it. Keep going. Ignore that because it is so not true. Go where you are seen. Go where you are desired. Get away from the places where you are not. I walk through the world largely unseen, like in terms of an attractive 57-year-old woman. But when I really want to be seen, I will get seen, right? It's still available to me and it's still available to you. And I am utterly convinced and committed to my attractiveness until the end of my life. No one can steal that from me. It is who I am, and I embody that. And I will not let society's expectations of a woman my age get in the way of me experiencing pleasure and joy until the end of my life. And it takes a lot of work undoing the programming that we've gone through, and we have to constantly fight it. And once you start to uncover things, you will realize, oh, that's what that is. Oh, like you, my favorite thing to do is to say, is that true? When I come up again, is that actually true? And typically it's not. Like I just need to rewrite it, right? I need to rewrite the program.
I think it's wonderful that you just you made it sound easy at first and then you made it sound hard, but just decide. You
Yeah.
decided you would not let all those outside things affect how you experienced your life yourself, personally,
Yeah.
privately. And it came down to all the work that you did, all the deep dives that you did, all the deprogramming that you did. It came down to just deciding to do that for yourself. Nobody else was going to do it or could do it for you. You didn't have to go buy special equipment or a new face cream. Like you just
Right.
decided for yourself, this is how I'm going to live my life. Yeah, okay, yes, of course you had to do the work. It wasn't snapping your fingers, but this is how I'm going to live my life. And then it just was because you made the decision.
Yeah. Agency.
Agency. Tell me more about that.
It's it's what's in us. And it is us taking action toward having our own back. This goes into the realm of so many things. But when we get married, we do not lose our agency. We have to still fight for ourselves. We do not meld into the other person. When we become a parent, if we become a parent, it is not our job to become one with our child and to be at their beck and call. We have to protect ourselves. That's our agency. That's how we can still give, is by showing up for ourselves. And if we buy into this, like, I give up everything for others, we end up with emptiness and we can't actually give. We can't serve others when we're depleted. But agency requires a commitment and an action on our own part. And it doesn't mean that it's the flip of a switch. It is a practice of us continuing to show up for ourselves. I look at my experience with doctors and going through menopause as one of those spaces where, look, some people are still on the learning curve of menopause and they're down here, and I'm like, even though they're a doctor, I might be a little bit ahead of them and on the latest studies or information, whatever. But I'm way ahead of them on my body. I know my body. I know what is like I suspect is going on, or what my personal experience is with it, or like just being able to say, this isn't right. I need to feel better. That's what agency is having the forethought and the recognition of like, I need help with this, and then fighting for it and not accepting a roadblock, a gatekeeping situation, a lack of knowledge, a by the book sort of thing. Keep going. You need to keep going and figure it out. It's going to require a lot of work on your part. And that's the case in the sexuality space. Let's say if you're not experiencing orgasm with your partner, is that their fault? Like, look, women, very few women experience orgasm with penis and vagina sex. So if you're in a heterosexual relationship and that's your primary like experience of sex is penis and vagina, you're probably not getting off very often, right? So well, like, oh, he's not taking care of me. Oh, he prioritizes his pleasure over mine. That might be the case. But also, why aren't you prioritizing it? Why aren't you doing it? Take care of yourself, right? You need to learn how to do that for yourself. Don't expect someone else to know what to do. They don't understand your body. And it's not even a man-woman thing. It's a body by body thing, right? Everyone has different experiences, different needs, different ways that they want to experience pleasure. So agency is you saying, I'm going to figure this out, and then I will inform the other person or voice my needs and show them, right?
I wrote down a quote from you, and sounds like it's not connected to this, but I promise it is, and I'll get there. You said, I want to have hot sex until I die.
Mm.
And you're talking now about agency to be the person that makes sure that you have the hot sex until you die. Who's responsible for that? You are. And you're going to take charge of that. And you were also talking about menopause. And I know from our previous conversations that you did have some challenges there in terms of receiving the care that you needed. Was there some overlap there of like the hot sex until you die being a priority, the agency to make sure that happened, and then boom comes menopause, having to navigate that?
Oh, yeah. Very interconnected, because menopause can feel like the curtain has come down on your life and your sex life, right? Like suddenly we don't feel like ourselves. Where did that person go that I used to be? And where's my libido anymore? Like initially in my 40s, I had still like super high libido for a long time, actually, until recently. I'm a late blooming everything. Like I'm a late blooming kinky person, a late blooming queer. I'm a late blooming menopausal woman. And I'm grateful for that, because it has allowed me a lot of wonderful experiences. But when hormonal decline really started to occur for me, it was like, oh shit, this is hard. And I thought, because of my age and my experience and hearing a lot about like estrogen potentially causing breast cancer. That's all I remember. It was in my head. And it was just like, I don't want to take hormones. I don't want to take hormones because of this fear. And then I was like, I'm going to power through this because I didn't really have an understanding of what that meant or like the potential benefits or like why we have hormones and like how they can actually help us later in life. So I kind of blew the lid off that for myself, listening to the experts, reading the literature, following the latest studies. Oh my God, we're actually finding that there's potential health benefits for hormone replacement, brain cognitive protection, which is super important for me because that's my family's main issue. Um, bone health, skin health, and of course, sexual pleasure, and keeping your parts from atrophy, right? Using them to prevent atrophy, but also helping them with hormone replacement, right? So all of this has required me to be very diligent and committed in my agency within the medical space. And it still continues and it's still a headache, but I do it because I'm worth it. And because, and like I am witnessing my parents go through significant decline. My mom is experiencing stroke, cognitive decline, UTIs. She just broke her hip, all of those things. And she's not 80 yet. And I know that this becomes, for some people, very common, but in my opinion, she's too young to be experiencing that. And it's happened very rapidly. And I want to take action now, and I wish I had taken it earlier, that helped me on my aging journey, so that it looks different than what my mom is experiencing right now. And because I enjoy touch, I'm a sensuality slut. I want to be able to experience that up until the end. And why not? Like, I ask, why not? Because just because other people are doing it a particular way, and this is kind of the trajectory that we're on, I don't like that trajectory. I don't want to be on that trajectory. I want to set myself up for success and to experience my body in ways that feel good as much as possible. I don't have control over everything, but I want to tip the scales, right? And I think also another issue for women are people experiencing menopause is this belief or expectation, and also goes into like buy the thing that will help you feel better, which could be a supplement or a practice or the self-care things, the wellness things, the self-care products that we have. But you can't ultimately most of us cannot self-care our way out of bottomed out hormones,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely right. What do you mean by bottomed out hormones for somebody that didn't resonate with? But I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. When our ovaries aren't producing eggs anymore, we don't have a need for them to produce estrogen, right? And that means a significant loss in a lot of our function. Hormones exist throughout our bodies, right? Like, I am not the medical person, so hop in whenever I say something incorrectly, but hormones live throughout the body. We have hormone receptors all over our body, including our brains. And the ovaries are the primary producers of some of those hormones when they're functioning. Some of us lose that function from surgeries, having our ovaries removed. Some of us experience it in menopause. And here's the thing, we didn't used to live this long. Okay. So we just sort of accepted it. And now it's like, look, I still want to consider myself, even at 57, maybe a little bit past midlife, but still midlife. You know what I mean? It's like you still want to feel like you have a long life to live, but I don't want to live a long life that's like with frailty and cognitive, like I want to feel good. I want to be healthy. And in order to do that, I do have to supplement my hormones at this stage because my body is not producing them in the same way that it used to. And it's not just estrogen, it's testosterone, it's other things. And it doesn't mean go like constantly get blood tested for things like, look, we're a certain age, we're experiencing this, we know that they're all in decline. Perimenopause is a little bit wackier, right? But like menopause and like no more periods, menopause has occurred. You have 1 year since your last period. That is when menopause has officially happened. You are not going to have the hormones that you once had. So for me, part of my self-care goes beyond the massages and, the lighting candles and the eating healthy and the exercising and the yoga and whatever, meditation. It goes into the space of like, what medically do I need to do to help myself feel better?
And have you found, because certainly hormone supplementation, hormone therapy is not for every woman, not for every person. And I think there's, like, as you pointed out, this doctor is going to say one thing, the next doctor is going to say something else.
Yeah.
It's actually great new research. It's not necessarily being disseminated or well understood.
Right.
There's a lot of competing opinions on hormone replacement therapy. So we're just talking about you. Have you found that for you, that given that you have an emphasis on agency and you have an emphasis on enjoying your sensuality and sexuality through your lifetime, have you found that working with the hormone replacement has been one of the ways that you express your agency to do that?
Absolutely. Yes.
What are the benefits that you found? This is not a sales thing for hormone replacement therapy.
No.
It's actually something that you coach women on, which is sort of why I wanted to zoom in on it a little bit, because it's a very real lived experience for you and every woman at some point, if she's lucky enough to reach that point.
Mm-hmm.
So for you, what was the decline specific to your sexuality and sensuality, and what were the benefits when you started on hormone supplement?
So for a long time, all right, well, let's go way back. When I was still married in my first marriage, and this was late 30s, early 40s, I had moments of frustration that I had never experienced previously. And how we were talking about my ex-husband's resentment, well, no wonder, because I was annoyed a lot. I'm a chronic eye roller. I'm very expressive. And I think the eye rolling was like he felt very attacked at times, which I don't blame him. But it's like I felt under attack with little kids. And at the time, like it was probably the beginning of my hormones starting to go haywire, right? And I did feel like there was a bit of a push of like, we need to fix her, which looking back, like I mostly feel that way now. At the time, I was like, I had hints of that, but now I'm like, oh my God, that's really what was happening. And I did end up taking antidepressants because I also had moments of rage. And that's hard to say as a mom. That's hard to say as a a person who's not proud of the rage, right? But it's real. And I think so many of us feel that, like where we have moments of like not being in control of our emotions, and the hormones going haywire has a lot to do with that. I don't know if HRT at that time would have been helpful, but the SSRIs did not feel in alignment for me.
The SSRI was the antidepressant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I did not feel that it was in alignment for what I wanted, yet I had a little bit of fear around not being able to uh, control my rage. Like it was even just momentarily, like it wasn't like extended, but I would explode at times. And it's like, that's not great for little kids to experience or anyone else. So I did end up on the antidepressants, always with the goal of like, okay, a little bit of a bridge, but my goal is to get off of these as soon as possible. And that was not a pleasant experience either. And I think that so many people who have ovaries go through this and they feel broken. They feel like something's wrong with them. And there's so much shame around that. And then the lack of knowledge. Like it's easier to write a prescription for antidepressants because women are just kind of like needy like that or whatever. Like we don't really understand what's going on here. So let's just band-aid the problem. Look, antidepressants have youthfulness and many people need them. I'm not knocking them, but it didn't feel in alignment for me. I'm grateful that they were there, but I probably would have been more grateful if I had had more support around hormones and perimenopause and menopause. And that exists now. So further down the road, and probably throughout my 40s, I have been struggling with my metabolism, blood sugar, weight gain, body aches, achy joints. My sleep started going not so great. I often would attribute it to being a parent and like just constant awareness of what your kids are doing. Um, and then a few years ago, it was just like full on, the hot flashes were just hardcore. But I felt like I had the flu a lot. Like I was starting to get the flu, body achy joints, sluggishness. Oh, the main one, brain fog. Like couldn't remember things. I was always tired, very taxing to try to learn something new. That was very frustrating. So these hot flashes are happening and I'm going to power through this and then it'll be over was kind of my attitude. And then once again, podcasts came back into my world. Like I've been listening, but it was like a new form of like listening to what is possible with hormones. And I was like, yeah, I don't need that. Wait a second. What did they say? What? And like really starting to listen and being like, maybe I should try this. And just getting curious again and starting to explore more and then finally bringing it up with the doctor. I'm still on this journey of like, what is the right dose? Sometimes it changes. I'm now on this like my libido tank recently. Also, it's taking me longer to experience orgasm. I've had discomfort internally. The skin has felt more tender and irritated. Okay, I ended up getting, I'm on the estrogen patch, I'm on progesterone, and I ended up getting an estrogen cream for vaginal use. And that has helped with some of the skin irritations. And now I am just about to start using testosterone for my libido and for more energy. But once I started taking the patch, no more hot flashes, way better sleep, felt like myself again. And like that is such a gift to feel like, oh, yeah, I'm actually pretty awesome. Like I'm not this like person who's just kind of struggling, like it feels right. And it's not for everybody. Um, but I think it's something you're worth exploring.
In particular, when you have the very strong intention, like you have, it's about sex. I don't want to overplay that part. I mean, you talked about seeing your parents aging. You really want to feel, you're a vibrant person that comes through talking to you. You want to feel vibrant as you age as
Yes.
much as possible. And I love
Yes.
how you've taken responsibility for that yourself. Honestly, a doctor should have helped you with that. There should have been more medical guidance. It should have been standard
Totally.
care to monitor your hormones and know what
Yep.
was happening with you and be able to manage you along the way. But that didn't happen, and you did it for yourself. You were doing for yourself. And isn't that such a wonderful carry through of everything you learned from all of your other explorations? I mean, it's just
Yeah.
the journey continues. You're going through one door to the next door to the next door. You
Yeah.
make it sound very exciting. I don't know if that's how you're presenting it or not, but you make every
Well,
age and every stage sound exciting.
yeah. It should be inspirational, right? Because it's like we can look at it through the lens of like, look, I'm bitter in many ways about it. It's like, why do I have to teach you this shit? Like, we are half the population, people.
Yeah.
This is not fair. There is part of me that's really annoyed, but I'm not going to live in that space, right? I'm going to be like, okay, this is what I have to work with. These are the expectations for those of us socialized as women. Nope, not for me. These are the expectations for those people who are now in midlife. And basically like, oh, that's their new normal. They're not attractive anymore. Like, oh, it's throwaway. No, that's not for me either. Well, this is you can make it through this, like da 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 da, like hormones cause breast cancer. You don't want to do that. Nope, that's not for me either. I'm going to look at all the stuff and interrogate it, right? And also interrogate myself and like my ways of doing things, right? That's important. Like we have to evolve all the time to stay vibrant, to stay healthy and growing and creating new neural pathways. And I'm just like really tapping into that now. And part of that is probably because I don't have brain fog in the same way that I used to. So it's been like, oh my God, yeah, like what is that about? And getting back to like sex and kink and my relationship style, that's part of that for me. I like fucking with things. I like fucking with my own brain. Like, oh, is monogamy the only way? No, actually, like, but what about jealousy? Oh, well, let's play with jealousy. Like, you know what? It's a fallacy to think that I have control over someone else and their feelings towards me, and they're not having feelings towards anyone else. That's just a fallacy. That is the social construct. It's just bullshit. What if I actually let that person be free? Let them. I mean, they're going to do it anyway. Like, what if we're free and then I can be solid and like actually support that? And then, like, what do they bring back to me? They bring back a person who's like happier, who feels seen, who feels cared for, who feels like they don't have to sneak around, right? It's like, no, go play. I'll go play over here. Let's come back together and play together. Like we're doing the thing. Sometimes we do play together. And that's part of it too. Like, why not? Like, why can't we just turn things on their heads and just be like, oh, yeah, I want to try that. And of course, you need someone that if it's important to stay whole in the process and not lose yourself. So you have to be very strong and recognize what's good and not good for you. It doesn't mean everything is good for you, but like, what can you play with first to just sort of shake that? That's how I look at
And I feel like pretty much everyone listening is like, will you be my bestie and can we have coffee once a week and just make me like explore just a little bit too through influence? But actually you are a coach. So you can't be everybody's bestie. You do have to work. What is your ideal client look like? Because I think your method feels not exactly across the board. Nothing's across,
it.
pretty much across the board on some version of what you're saying. It sparks interest. It's intriguing. It's interesting. Like we want a piece of that. But who is your perfect client? What's the person you usually work with?
Mm. My perfect client is someone who is like really able to be like a big chunk of where I am in terms of their mindset. Like, yes, and I want more, but I don't know all the things. And I'm not sure how to get there. So that's my perfect client who I'm not like a tantra person. That's not my thing. Like, my sexuality is around non-monogamy and kink and also bisexuality. So if you're like a combination of those things like I am, that's perfect. I'm a Gen Xer. I'm an older Gen Xer. I like working with people, you know, a couple of my clients are in their 30s and they're great because they're there, right? So it could be younger, it could be older, but Gen X is kind of my people. And you could be in a relationship or not, but you are ready and wanting to prioritize pleasure. And not just like if you're just adding toys to your sexual repertoire, that's probably, I ideally someone is a little bit further along than that. But if you need help with that, I can do that. But I'm talking like other types of toys and like a little bit broader. Like I love food, so I like to equate everything to like food, like a smorgasbord or flavors of ice cream or different flavors. Like I want to try all the different flavors, right? And then like there are some that are really special flavors for me, but it's like they're kind of off the wall. Like most people are like, ooh, but if you're someone who's like, there's so many of us that read erotica that have our go-tos that turn us on or our fantasies. Most women, most people actually, there's a majority of people, so it's not just women, fantasize about being forced with sex. Now, let's acknowledge trauma that no one wants non-consensual force, yet it is a fantasy. And for me, I love playing with that in my relationship because it's safe. What can we explore that pushes the boundaries for us in a safe way? Like we want to stay whole as we're doing it, but like what is on that menu? What things am I not even aware of? Like, can being spanked actually be sexy and hot and not just a traumatic experience from childhood? Can it be healing? Can something be healing when I play with a different version? That's who I love working with.
You're ready for the woman that wants the smorgasbord and also the secret club menu.
Yeah. Yes, the secret
That
pop-up
really,
restaurant that no one knows about.
yeah.
Yeah.
All right. This has been fantastic. with your permission, I'm going to post all your resources and your links and all your social. So if this resonated with someone, that they can find you and talk to you privately. But thank you so much, not just for sharing your personal experience, which you don't seem to be shy about it, but it is personal to talk about yourself and your medical issues and relationship issues, but also to kind of, the way you gave it to us was like a story of a journey, that just keeps getting better. And what a wonderful way to envision aging, as opposed to what's usually presented to us. So thank you very much for that. That was refreshing.
Thank you for the opportunity. And I appreciate you doing this, because sharing our stories and destigmatizing sex and the challenges that we may have is so important, because we learn from each other.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. If you liked, please like. If you'd like more, please subscribe. And if you have a story you'd like to share, I'd love to hear from you. Until next time.